WSMN 1590. This is your host, Jim Lawrence of The Jim Lawrence Show. Thanks for tuning in this fantastic Tuesday afternoon. We're going to continue to blast the truth all over downtown Nashua and the rest of the world right here from the turret at WSMN. Now, for those of you who have been paying attention to social media, you may have noticed a couple of things different about this show. Usually the first segment of The Jim Lawrence Show is our Toxic Tuesday segment. But today we're going to do something a little special. You know, it's been a long time since I've had the honor of having an interview with a couple of gentlemen that are in the studio with me today. But today we're going to have an invasion of the Jim Lawrence Show. That's right. We're going to have Granite Grok right here joining forces with the Jim Lawrence Show for the first time ever. So I'm going to give a very warm and special welcome to, first and foremost, Skip Murphy. Thanks for joining me today on the Jim Lawrence Show.
Oh, thank you very much. This is fun. Came all the way down from the Lakes region, ran into a little bit of traffic, but it's being way out in the rural area. I keep forgetting how hard it can be to find a parking space around here.
You know, there's a little bit of truth to that. But, you know, thank you once again for making that trek down here. And I also want to give a very warm welcome to no stranger to the microphone, none other than Steve McDonald. He's got a big smile, by the way, in the studio here. Let's see if he's smiling by the end of this. I'm sure he will be. But welcome once again to the Jim Lawrence Show.
Well, thanks, Jim. Thanks for inviting us to be on the program for 2 hours, which is always nice because most people can't tolerate us for that long.
Back to the parking. I noticed that the maximum amount of time is only 90 minutes.
Oh, you just messed up. You tipped off all the parking enforcement officers here in Nashua that there's a bunch of cars that they might be able to ticket. But I'm quite sure they might, depending on whether they agree with the views that we espouse here on the show, they may give us a pass since we're members of the press, trying to inform the public here in Nashua of all that's going on here in the Granite State.
Hey, and we're strong supporters of public safety.
No, we're in deep sneakers.
What? You are. I didn't park on the street. I parked back there. I'm good.
Yes, Jim. Here we go. We are the ADD group, and we're starting off loud and proud.
Yeah, we're already starting off like this. This is kind of scary. You know, you think the listeners can tolerate this for 2 hours?
And you brought this on yourself.
Yes, I did. I invited you guys in here. You know what? I have to honestly tell you, I had the opportunity to interview with a lot of different outfits here in the Granite State, having run for Congress twice. And you guys were the most fun.
Thank you. I take that as a high accolade.
There you go. Also, I don't mind giving you guys a little bit of credit for talking about some issues that a lot of other news or media outlets wouldn't feel comfortable with talking about. And some of these things are very important. So, you know, I'm not going to give you a free pass today. So I'm going to hit you right in the center of it. You know, we're going to go way outside of the Granite State to begin this show. We're going to talk about something that, you know, many people have strong opinions about. It's the forest fires that are going on in the Amazon right now. If you're watching the news, I mean, every night you see
footage. Jim's looking at us because Steve and I are smiling at each other. It's like, yeah.
You know what? Wait a minute. I feel like I'm at the zoo. I mean, I looked at both of you when I said that, and I felt like I was at the lion cage, and I saw the lion licking his lips like he was getting ready to get a big juicy steak thrown at him. You know, you guys were waiting to talk about this. Is that what it is?
No, I happened to have written about it yesterday and today.
Oh,
and,
okay.
Whenever they talked about it at the G7, and a lot of celebrities have gotten kind of uppity about it, and a lot of pro athletes have said some things and tweeted some things, and that's usually a good sign that it's something you should check out because it's probably nonsense. And so I was doing a little research, and it turns out that NASA, that sort of government agency with all the satellites.
Oh, that little small space agency that doesn't do much.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
okay.
Apparently they've been looking at the fires in the Amazon, and they say that between for the last 15 years or so, the current situation is average. The amount of area being burned, it's a little heavier in Brazil, but there's less of it in other countries where there's Amazon forest, and the total is average. So everybody's freaking out about what is another average dry season in the Amazon. Same, pretty much the same amount of fire they've always had. And then, of course, if you do a little more research, which some other folks did, and I just happened to find, the people who are tweeting pictures of the Amazon are tweeting forest fire pictures from 2015, 1989, 2012. And they're saying, oh, fire. What's wrong year, goofball? Okay.
Well, I'm not surprised to hear that, because every time we see one of these major news stories coming out, you tend to see these pictures come out, and it's reminded me of the situation at the border when you saw those pictures in the media about the children who were being detained in cages, and the media caption was dog cages, and they were trying to lambaste the Trump administration. But all the pictures that they were broadcasting were from the Obama administration. So, I mean, this is a very common thing. But I'm going to go back to the forest fires, because something developed today that is, to me, earth-shattering, is the fact that the president of France offered to support Brazil in the tune of $22 million to help fight these infamous fires in the Amazon. However, the leader of Brazil, an almost indignation, snubbed the offer and basically has now thrown down the gauntlet and said, well, you know what, maybe if the president of France apologizes for all the insults he's thrown at Brazil, I may accept his measly little $20 million of aid. So that's kind of an interesting, back and forth that's going on right now between the president of France and the government in Brazil. I mean, any thoughts on this? What's starting this? Sounds like
yes.
Skip is up next.
Yes, the War of the Wives. Apparently, Macron has been making fun of Bolsonaro's, who is the conservative new head of the state there, and they've been doing a back and forth. So that's where the insulting is coming from. But I also noted that somebody also noted, like Steve did on the pictures and things like that, well, this was not a problem last year or the year before or whatever. Most of it are the fires happening on farmland already. It's not actually in the rainforest, but there's a conservative government in place now. There wasn't last year or the year before or the year before that, but now it's a conservative government that's at fault and for blame for all this. So this is happening at several different layers of what's going on, what is being reported in the press versus what's actually happening on the ground. And as always, as we see here in America, things aren't always as they seem.
And of course, Macron has made some sort of I don't like Trump-ish type Brazilian president comments about how it must be the Brazilian government's fault that they're having these forest fires, which, as when Skip just pointed out, all the previous years when they didn't have a conservative government, they had the same amount of fires and nobody cared. Not at all. And he's just being a little bit Trumpian when he says, to heck with you. I don't need your money. This isn't a special problem. Get the hell out of my face,
It's interesting that you say that, because one of the things that the leader of Brazil came back with was he viewed the French government's offer, I should say the president of France, because it's really not the French government. It's a combination of nations talking about this coming out of the G7 summit. But he kind of viewed this as a little bit of I won't say a power grab, but an attempt for other foreign powers to insert themselves into policy in the Amazon.
He used
white privilege.
President.
I went there.
Wait a minute.
No.
I should have had my camera up for that
I
one.
was excited. Yeah, he used the word colonialism a bit in his replies to the French president, and there were a lot of implications about how perhaps he should be dealing with his own problems, like, say, a burning cathedral that everybody's familiar with called Notre Dame. I implicated earlier today as well that the Yellow Vests had started an awful lot of things on fire in France in the last 6 to 8 months, and there wasn't much from him about it except that they should go to prison, So France has a lot of problems on their own, and I think he's perfectly right to push back. I think it was a good idea. I mean, does he really need the help? I don't know that he does. This is not a new problem, and it's certainly not larger than any previous year. I think it's all posturing by the G7 and everybody else. You'll notice Trump wasn't even at that part of the meeting because he probably had a pretty clear sense of what was going on. And I think it's all for show. I think it's political theater.
I mean, they've already rented a 747 water tanker to lay down on these fires. It's not like they don't have the money. They're importing a bunch of other fire equipment, other fire airplanes. So, yeah, talking smack where there isn't one. But, we as conservatives here in the U.S., we're used to this kind of treatment. And I'm glad to hear that he's pushing back. And I hope that Macron gets a little embarrassed. I find that hard to believe, but it would be nice.
I don't see him getting embarrassed very, very easily. I mean, if you look, it's not that long ago that you had riots in France because of some of the ridiculous policies that they put in place that was basically punishing the French people economically.
Gas tax.
Yeah, well, for once, yeah. And it wasn't a gas tax. That was like gas extortion. That was some... if you had those types of policies implemented in the United States, I'm sure you'd have, an uprising in a few states.
It really is we're going to make you use less because that's our climate religion, and this is how we're going to do it.
Yeah, well, we could say we're seeing the same thing in France. You see it in California, and they haven't rebelled yet. I have friends in California I talk to, and I taunt them with the low prices we have here.
Is California still really considered part of the United States?
I don't know. They certainly do want to make themselves Cali-Mexico or something like that. Come on in. We'll pay for everything. Free stuff.
It's kind of ironic. I was actually stationed in Southern California in the early 90s, and I don't remember the sentiment being what it is now in California. A lot must have changed there since I moved out of there because people, they may have had their ideas about things like climate change or the environment, but, to their credit, I'll say in Southern California, they did have a little bit of a smog problem. So I'll give them a pass on that. But a lot of these other things that I'm hearing coming out of there, the immigration policies and stuff, this must be new stuff because it wasn't like that back then.
And this is in the cities because, most of what we hear out of California comes out of L.A., San Diego, San Francisco, even Sacramento, places with large populations. Basically, the people who decide who the senators are in that state.
Well, I was in Los Angeles.
Were you in L.A.?
I was working on our in our aerospace industry. Mm-hmm. So, that's where it is. But it's amazing to me to hear some of the stuff that I'm hearing coming out of California now.
And you can actually plot that out by the number of Republicans that have gone down, by the wacky Democrat policies that have gone up, as they have basically seized complete control of the state government. They don't care what other people want or wish. They don't care about their rural areas. They could care less about anybody who doesn't have the money to keep them reelected. If you notice how well Hollywood is treated, or Malibu, that basically helps drive everything that goes on in the state. Of course, given that the California GOP, one of the county GOPs raised a whole lot of money, and then they sent it out of the county to other Republicans, and they lost badly, and they're going, well, what happened? Stupidity reigned supreme.
Well, do Republicans even have a chance in California? I don't know. I'm not going to poke fingers at the party there, but
we do.
Do they have a chance?
Right now, no.
Yeah.
One, they don't have the leadership and they don't have the numbers anymore, but I think that they've wasted a lot of that. Plus, I think the Democrats have done there faster what the Labour Party did in England, where they said, well, we don't like the electorate. Let's bring in a new one. And effectively, that's what they've done in California.
Wow. Well, we're going to have to take a quick break. Time flies when you're having fun, but stay tuned. There'll be more conversations here on the Jim Lawrence Show featuring Granite Rock when we return. WSMN 1590. This is your host, Jim Lawrence of the Jim Lawrence Show. We are joined today in studio by none other than Granite Groksters, Skip Murphy and Steve McDonald. And before we went on break, we were having a conversation about a little war of the world. I shouldn't say war of the worlds, but war of words between the leader of Brazil and the president of France. So, yeah, what's a little forest fire in Amazon amongst friends, right? No big deal. But, we're probably, since we're talking about G7 related stuff, we might as well bring this up. They just recently had the G7 summit, and there was a lot of interesting things that came out of this. But one of the most interesting things to me is that somebody saw fit to launch what I consider to be a sneak attack on the Trump administration, but basically inviting a delegation from Iran to come sneak in the back door to kind of upstage what was going on in the G7 and maybe put a little bit of pressure or focus a little bit of attention on what's going on between Iran and the United States based on some of the policies that have recently come up. And the reason why I find this very interesting is twofold. One is that unbeknownst to many Americans, when I was in the military, I remember working on briefings that I would fly over to Europe and give to NATO based on various programs. And before you can tell anything to a foreign ally or a foreign military, you have to go through what's called public disclosure. So what you're going to tell whatever this foreign military is looking to get information on, you have to go down to the Pentagon and say, is this cleared for foreign disclosure? And not all foreign disclosures are equal. So it was always interesting to see what they would say. Oh, you could tell the Brits this. You could tell the Germans this. And you could tell the French this. And the French, it was always very narrow. And I couldn't figure it out till I really started thinking about it. And I said, wow, we really don't trust the French. I wonder why. Could it be because maybe what de Gaulle did after World War II, or maybe them denying us airspace when we wanted to launch our airstrikes on Libya? Or, maybe this more recent example of what just happened at the G7 summit. But can we trust the French? I don't know. You guys both look dumbfounded here.
No, I'm just saying, do you want to go first or shall I?
I don't think so. I don't know enough about the relationship, to be honest with you. I mean, my personal feeling, I'm not British, so I don't despise them. But, you've just given us an excellent laundry list.
Wait a minute. Aren't you? Oh, wait, hold on. That's right. You mean you're named after the restaurant that serves a Big Mac, right?
No, it's MAC. Close.
Oh, close? Not so you're not.
I did work there. I did, and they spelled it wrong on my check. But other than that, no.
So you should be wearing a kilt in here then.
Well, I'm adopted. I can get away without wearing it.
I was wearing a kilt on Saturday. What are you talking about?
There's nothing wrong with kilts.
Nope.
Very comfortable.
We're going to get Skip in a kilt next time.
Sure. What's that line about scaring small children and animals?
Well, no, you're not going to scare any small children just because you're wearing a kilt, will we?
Don't know. You've never seen my legs.
Okay. Well, we won't sign you up for the Bonnie Knees competition. How about that?
Thank
you.
All
right.
I look at it as given that France is one of the leading pushers of trying to keep the Iran agreement alive, I can understand why there is great reticence to be able to share a lot of things. And this latest thing of surprising the G7 with the foreign financial minister from Iran, well, it really is a no-no. That was basically a big insult, adding on to what Macron was doing earlier to Trump during their joint presser. Most of Europe isn't as thrilled about breaking up the Iran agreement, even though they know what's going on. They know it affects their people. They know it's affected American people. But they also see, the dollars that are associated with doing business in Iran. And as soon as it was allowed, they all ran in and got, hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars worth of business. And they're not too happy about having to leave it again. So they're saying, let's just be honest. They're two-faced. They say, one thing to this audience, they're saying another thing to this other audience, and the two don't always jive, especially when you're not always sure that there's a second or third or fourth audience, which obviously somebody in the U.S. does know about. So you can't trust the people that aren't acting to help your interests. Certainly France has their own national interests. Every country has their own. They need to pursue their own. But when you're openly saying that you're going to be a partner with the U.S., you have to assume that you have to help protect some of those U.S. interests at the same time. And I don't think it's being done.
That's a very interesting perspective. One thing that I, didn't talk about in that little history lesson about our recent history with the French was the fact that they supplied most of the engineers to help Saddam Hussein in the building of his nuclear reactors for his nuclear power plant as well. So, there's a lot of interesting history there in terms of foreign policy between us and France, even though they are, debatably our longest lived ally. They are, no doubt about it. They're our longest lived ally. But there's some strange thing going on there between the two of us, and I don't know how to categorize that.
Well, I see a big shift from Europe used to be our big base for foreign policy, foreign allies, but we're seeing them drift away. Both Germany and France have made it quite clear that they really want to push the EU as a separate nation state, where all the other borders kind of disappear. They're unhappy with the Brits. But yet now if you shift down to the Middle East, with Iran trying to take over the area politically, if not otherwise, you're seeing a coalition of former enemies aided by the U.S. trying to come together. The center of that is Israel. And you're hearing about these small little side deals that are going on with the people who ordinarily would hate them. But they're all realizing that, okay, the enemy of my enemy is also my enemy type of deal. So you're seeing help from Jordan, Saudi Arabia, a couple other of the countries down there. They're starting to get along a little bit easier. They may say, well, we don't like Israel, but they're certainly working with them. And that's been building over the last decade to now it may be one of our more favorite areas to be in, even though there's still a lot of conflict and chaos going on. So I'm looking at this going, okay, which landmass really is our friend? Because from this last meeting, it's obvious that France and Merkel doesn't like Trump either. So, throw that into the mix and you go, well, gee, I wonder why.
Well, it's, you bring up a very important distinction here is that there may be some personality issues that are really driving the bus here because Merkel and Trump do not get along.
Nope.
And, Merkel is a very strong leader. She's done a lot of great things for Germany, but for whatever reason, the dynamic between Trump and Merkel are horrible. And the other point that I think you brought up is the fact that France and Germany are very large proponents of the EU, but, why wouldn't they be? They're the two largest, power brokers in that setup, and they have the most to gain economically by having a strong EU going forward. So, of course, they'd be in favor of that. But one of the things that's interesting is that I don't think long-term that's necessarily going to be what wins out in the end. Because let's face it, Merkel's not going to be there forever. Trump's not going to be the president of the United States forever. Things are going to move forward, and both entities need each other in some way, shape, or fashion now to continue to be economically viable in the future. So, why? Let's think about it. Well, you're talking about from our perspective or theirs?
Ours.
Ours is...
Germany's economics are going into the bag. Same thing with France. They're stuck at basically the way that Japan was a couple of decades ago. Stagnation, high unemployment, especially among the younger workers, very strict regulations about when to hire and when to fire. Germany's not much better. They both have a lot of unrest from the imported, we talked about the importing a new electorate because you didn't like the present one. Well, they've done that already. Germany is in much worse shape, but not by much, I guess, compared to France. They both have open rebellion going on. And, Trump is outwitting them on the economic issues. It used to be that, look at the tariffs that were applied to German cars, or the threat of it. Now, all of a sudden, free trade with the German automakers and the metal workers and all that stuff. So, Merkel has also gotten herself in trouble with their energy policies. Oh, forget nuclear, forget coal. We'll go just with the renewables like they want to do here. Well, that's not working out too well for them. They've got the highest energy costs anywhere on the European continent.
And that's one of the most regressive things you can do to your economy.
Yep.
What I was going to say before you started, obviously the U.S. market is very important to them because we're a large consumer of a lot of their products. I would be a little bit more sensitive from our standpoint to Germany than France right now, just because there are a lot of veins, believe it or not, through to their manufacturing. There's a lot of things that they produce that a lot of people don't realize, a lot of machinery and a lot of equipment that we're currently utilizing in our economy here. So there are some trades. Now, granted, are they as relevant to the U.S. economy as a China? No. But there's still some tentacle. There's some connections there between.
I think you're seeing Trump play some of that dynamic when you talked about moving forward. Our original mission with Europe was NATO. It was to defend against the Russians and the USSR, which no longer exists. And while the Russians still
does it?
Them,
we'll talk about that
USSR
next topic. We'll talk about that next topic.
The Russians are still there. They still have that mindset. They still have, I would believe, global ambitions because a lot of the same people are still in power. They've been around. They came up through the system. But our relationship with Europe used to be to protect them or to work together to protect us all from this Soviet threat. It's a different threat now. We could argue that Iran, a nuclear Iran, would be a much greater threat. Russia certainly thinks so on one level, but on another level, they're like, well, maybe if we help them. So there's a lot of things going on here. There really, really is. And I think that, Trump has talked about pulling back our military from all these bases overseas. And, he's obviously pushed NATO in these foreign countries into saying, look, you've got to pay more of your own freight, okay? We need some of our money to pay for things on our side that we haven't been paying attention to. And he went over there and he pushed it, and NATO loves him. They think he's great. The commanders are like, thank you for helping us get some of these funds that we need.
Except for Germany.
Right. But that's just, it's history. If you go back through history, allies become enemies, enemies become allies. I mean, that's just the dynamic of culture and economics and demand and supply and need and everything else. And if we discover that we can build things here that are built in Germany cheaper, somebody will figure out we could do that. And then Germany becomes less relevant. But if they decide there's other strategic value, or maybe it's just easier for them to build it, so be it. We don't really know today, but the current relationship is a little tense.
Yeah, especially where Germany has been making inroads with Russia. Trump made the offer, we'll sell you lots of natural gas. And they went backwards and went to Russia to put in 2 new pipelines. Now, Russia hates Germany. And as we have seen in the past over the last decade, Russia has no problem with turning off the gas in the middle of wintertime. Well, this is a great partnership here, guys. But, does NATO need to be there? And I'll go to this point. Does NATO have to go there? Because I look at, if war erupts, it's almost like 2 80-year-old invalid men flailing at each other because neither one of their militaries is worth spit anymore. And most of Germany's forces are undertrained, overweight. You've got to pay them overtime to fight because they're all in a union. Only one sub works. Most of their helicopters don't work. I mean, you can go on and on and on.
Take that hill. I got to talk to my steward.
You might get that. And Germany's not much better. Pretty much most of their fleets are just rusting hulks. They can't keep their one aircraft carrier afloat hardly. And they can't keep their conscripts or their voluntary soldiers in the army. I mean, they got nuclear weapons, and that's about it.
Well, there's a couple of ways you can look at this. Is NATO relevant today? a lot of people would have said that NATO was a Cold War relic and, not necessarily very relevant, maybe about 10 or 15 years ago. But we're going to have to circle back because we're going to talk about this thing that Steve was talking about earlier with the former Soviet Union, because I do believe that one of the emerging threats that we're going to have to come back and really try and address is that Russia is remilitarizing. I mean, they are building up a military infrastructure that they haven't had in a while. And, they're doing that for a reason. And if they continue to do that, there has to be some kind of a counter on the other side to address that. I mean, from a strategic standpoint, maybe NATO needs to be revamped or relooked at, but I mean, that's the natural organization that would be used to counter that threat. So, I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how this all develops.
I agree. And you're right. I don't think Russia ever stopped being that ambitious.
But they have no money, and their population is growing smaller. Just remember back about 4 or 5 years when they rolled out their great new battle tank, and they were about to put it on parade. It drove down about 200 yards and then died. It stopped.
Yeah, and their super secret missile base just blew up.
Well, not the base,
yeah,
but
that's right. That's right. And a lot of the stuff.
To your point, though, I think think about it. He's right. Maybe they do. Maybe there's a last gasp. Maybe this is our thing. Maybe we're, if we're going down, we're going to go grab some land and take some names and whatever language I can't use, to show some historical meaning and relevance. I think that's important to them.
I bet you it turns into the last gasp of the Third Reich with the Battle of the Bulge, where they massed everything together and they still lost.
I'm not saying you're wrong, but he's right. They might try.
Well,
they may try.
And here's the other specter in the room is that you have to acknowledge that a world superpower that is a nuclear power still has the ability, whether they win or lose a conflict, to inflict massive damage on their enemies. So to ignore that threat, in my mind, could potentially be a fatal mistake on our part. I look at the world as a very evolving, for lack of a better term, chessboard right now, and things are moving all over the place. In terms of what the real threats to the United States were before versus now, they have changed greatly, but there are some tried and true things that I don't think have changed. And I think Russia, until, something changes drastically, will continue to be somewhat of a threat to the United States, just for the simple fact that they are a nuclear power. I mean, no other reason.
Yep. They're a first-rate nuclear power with a third-rate economy. If you look at the stats, we're at about $20 trillion a year. I think when I last looked, they were under, they're around $1 trillion. It's sort of like what Reagan figured out right off the bat. We could just spin them into oblivion.
Well, I wish we'd hurry up and start doing it again, because you know what? In my estimation, there is no more dangerous enemy than a desperate one. And if their economy starts to really tank or things get really bad there, the fact that they're on the verge of collapse is one thing. The fact that they are on the verge of collapse and they have the ability to send out their bee stingers at us at a very rapid rate is another thing. Unto itself.
Yeah, I'm not underestimating what they can do. I'm just saying over the long term, they are going bye-bye.
I hope you're right. But you know what?
Me too. Me too.
Berlin Wall fell in the early 90s, and we're still dealing with it. So.
Well, not only that, but now we've got socialism on the rise here in the U.S. So did we actually win the Cold War?
Well, I don't know. Ask AOC. Ask Bernie Sanders, I guess.
Well, we'll have to find out.
Yep. We're going to have to answer this question later. We're going to go for a quick break, but when we return, there'll be more conversation with Granite Grok right here on the Jim Lawrence Show when we return.
I want you to want me. I'm going crazy.
WSMN 1590. This is your host, Jim Lawrence of the Jim Lawrence Show. Welcome back. We are still joined by Skip Murphy and Steve McDonald here from Granite Grok on the Jim Lawrence Show for a Granite Grok invasion. So far, nothing's got blown up. So that's pretty good. We haven't done any damage, but there's still plenty more to talk about, so you never know what might happen.
We have to raise the level up a little bit, Steve, here.
But we haven't started talking about local stuff yet.
Not yet.
Yeah, I've been slowing you guys up talking about forest fires in Brazil, G7. I haven't even started talking about China yet. But, since we brought it up, let's talk about China. How many items do you think that between the three of us, we walked into the studio here today that are made in China?
Many.
Yeah. The electronics, obviously, the camera, the phones. This and this made here in the U.S.
That's
Lands
impressive because I don't know if any of my clothing was made in the U.S. Maybe my shoes. That's about it.
Don't know about anything else, but made in the U.S.
I know this ring was made in the U.S.
Yes.
My
your
United
Academy.
States Air Force Academy ring. That's
I
made
was
in the
made in
U.S.
the U.S.
Yeah, that's right. Were you made in the U.S.?
I was.
You were?
I am from here.
Good. You sure?
Yep.
Did you bring your birth certificate?
I did not, but I was born in Tewksbury, Massachusetts.
Okay.
So
Is that part of the United States?
it used to be. Now it's in Massachusetts, so it may not be.
Yeah, I was about to say, when was it part of the United States?
Way back at the beginning.
Yeah, in the Revolution. That's about it. That was the last year I think Massachusetts might have been in the U.S. What do you think?
Yeah, what a shame to have the history and the meaning of Lexington and Concord and the shot heard round the world to see what they have devolved into. And I'm originally from Massachusetts as well.
Oh, really? What town are you from?
Brockton.
Ooh. South Shore, huh?
South Shore, and I'll never go back again. I went back a few years ago when my mom passed away, and just for the heck of it, I just drove around for a little bit, and I said, this is not the town I grew up in, and I headed up north.
It's very interesting to look at history, and you're right. The shot heard around the world, the beginning of the Revolutionary War. I mean, the rabble-rousers all came out of Massachusetts. And I kind of think about some of the things that we see, in modern days. Like, for example, when they have a major snowstorm, the governor has no problem, whether it's a Republican or Democrat, coming out there in the air and says, yes, we have now made it illegal for you to drive on the streets. Stay at home or we're going to give you a ticket. That doesn't happen in New Hampshire. We're in the same region. We have the same amount of snow, but for some reason, the citizens of Massachusetts are, how should we say this? They're less inclined to buck against their government when the government encroaches directly on their rights. And I think that the government in New Hampshire, and I've seen two governors, a Democrat and a Republican, get directly asked the question by the media whether they were going to implement a Massachusetts-style ban on driving on the roads, and both said no. And there's a difference there. And I think both of those governors, to their credit, recognize the fact that the citizens of New Hampshire understand what the function of government is, what their role is, what their rights are, and I don't think that they wanted the pitchforks and the torches to be outside the State House when they tried to tell New Hampshire citizens they couldn't drive on the roads they pay for.
I am wondering, though, if we are rapidly approaching a tipping point where we will lose that. When I look at all of the bills that have been rammed through the Senate, New Hampshire Senate and New Hampshire House this past session, because the Democrats hold that absolute majority, and the kinds of things that they wish to take away from ordinary citizens just because it's good for you, or that obnoxious viewpoint of we know better than you, where they've gone from representing past governing to ruling. The stupid thing out in the Keene area. Well, we're going to take your stoves away, your wood stoves, because of air pollution. We're going to take your guns away. New Hampshire State Representative Catherine Rogers is decrying that Governor Sununu vetoed the anti-gun bills that she put forward, even as she has been convicted of assaulting a senior lady simply for holding a different political viewpoint.
Has she registered her hands as weapons yet? Why are you laughing?
I don't even think she did her community service or whatever
her sentence was.
Or whatever it was, she had to do some kind of I forgot what that made.
And there was anger management and
right,
classes
and
involved in that.
And the individual who was assaulted has attempted to find out if some evidence, some proof that these classes were taken, and there's none, and nobody's helping. So it looks like they probably just kind of shuffled it along, which is another bad sign.
Nothing to see here.
Nothing to see here. I mean, if you look at Massachusetts, which we were just talking about, they have a history of having House speakers who go to jail, kind of the same way.
Oh,
Chicago
there's only about
has,
3 or 4 recently. No big
Chicago has
deal.
mayors
Oh,
and
it's more than
governors
that.
The Republicans in Massachusetts are so desperate that they're thinking, well, we're going to go in New Hampshire and we're going to hold signs for them and we're going to door hang for them because there's no point to do it here. That's kind of how bad it's gotten.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Massachusetts is kind of like the former Soviet Union. It's like a one-party system. You get a vote and there's one name on the ballot and that's it. You move on. Only fights they have are primaries. It's the best I could see. I mean, which Democrat is going to win the primary, and then that's who's going to win the general election.
And again, that goes back to what Andrew Breitbart said before he died, which is politics is downstream from culture.
They're going to ticket your car.
No, the cops don't do that.
I know, I'm just kidding.
They're going to arrest somebody.
It was funny.
Were they chasing Ellen down the street or something?
No, she's going to call in, I think.
She is?
I'm going to
We're waiting for her. Ellen, will you call in?
You keep going.
Okay.
Number's waiting for you. 603-816-1590. Call in. Ask us a few questions. Ask us some tough questions about how Granite Grok can properly get information out to the electorate here in the Granite State.
Well, we just blog about it.
Yeah. And we're replicating ourselves. Did you know that?
You're cloning yourself or replicating?
We are.
Really?
We really are.
So how many skips are we up to now?
No, well, it's Granite Grok itself.
Okay.
Although when I first started up Granite Grok, and Steve was one of the people there, Tim Condon was another, and Tom Flaherty, we all met at a place, bring significant others. And on the way home, I looked at the most esteemed wife and said, well, what do you think of them? And she just looked back at me and said, they're all like you. And in
Was
different
that the
ways.
big thumbs up?
And
we got the vote of approval.
Yeah. And in different ways, we all were on the same page. So, we've grown tremendously. I just happened to tell Steve today, it took us 5 years to get 1 million page views on Granite Grok. This last year, we've gotten 1.27 million page views just in 1 year. And for a small political blog here in a very small state, I giggle every time I see it. And I just think we're filling a place in the marketplace that most of the media has run away from, which is conservatives. So we are becoming that home. So we're rolling out micro groks, Manchester Grok, Nashua Grok, Wyndham Grok, Monadnock Grok, Guilford Grok. So these are for people who don't necessarily want to write for Granite Grok at this type of things that we do on a regular basis. They want to concentrate on their local areas. And I think that's a great thing because we can provide more views for conservatives of the things that they're more interested in than what most of the mainstream media here in New Hampshire could ever hope to do.
Wow, so that's impressive. So is that like something you patented, micro grok?
I haven't copyrighted that. I really haven't. I'm not sure that we should, but something like Granite Grok is copyrighted and trademarked. So yeah, everything's operating under the umbrella of Granite Grok. We're going to be sharing materials between Granite Grok down to the micro groks and back forward.
We got somebody calling in. Should we let them through on the line here?
Absolutely.
Let's see who we've got on the line.
Hi there. This is Ellen from Merrimack.
Ellen, welcome to the Jim Lawrence Granite Grok Invasion Show. Glad you can make it.
Glad to do it. Consider me part of the Grok invasion.
There you go. You're more than welcome. So have you had the opportunity to listen to some of what we've been talking about?
I am sorry. I have not. Steve has just told me to put aside what I've got and listen in, and I would love to catch up.
Well, we'll get you right up to speed here in no time at all. So, before you came on, though, I have to tell you, we've talked about everything from forest fires in Brazil to the G7 to Russia to China. Now we're probably going to bring things closer to home because I feel the sense that we really want to talk, home is where you hang your hat, and, we really want to talk about homey stuff like Vito Sununu and other stuff like that.
What's going on at the State House and what people are doing to get ready for next year and what's going on with this budget that we haven't heard about. I'm all on board with that.
There you go. This budget. Yeah, we haven't even talked about the budget yet. Speaking of budgets,
What budget?
Yeah, well, the governor vetoed the budget. But what was in the budget?
Lots and lots of spending.
Well, yeah.
This is what Governor Sununu, when he vetoed the budget, did so because he was concerned about dramatic increases in spending. He was concerned about the treatment of business taxes for small business owners. So the veto went through, and the House and Senate are going to meet next month to deal with the vetoes, including the budget. But right now, all we know is that there are conversations going on between Governor Sununu and various legislators. What's going on in the sausage factory, we're not sure about. I don't know when the public is going to get a look at what is going to be some kind of compromise. And so, what do I tell my legislators? Is this going to be a thumbs up? Is this going to be a thumbs down? We're all waiting to know. And in the meantime, all of our state programs are supposed to be funded at the same level they were last year, going through the end of June. Only you find the Executive Council keeps having to put out these emergency appropriations here, there, and everywhere to keep the departments going. So this is going to have to be resolved within the next month.
So what happens if there is no resolution by the time they consider the vetoed bills? I mean,
it is most likely that a continuing resolution, again, a vote is going to keep going. The alternative is something that we see nationally, we don't see locally, although I suppose it could be done, is you simply shut down.
I mean, I was about to say, what are we, the feds now? I mean, this is something that Congress is known for. Oh, we're going to have a continuing resolution every year because they can't do their job and get an appropriation and authorization bill out in time. That's not something traditionally done here at the state level in New Hampshire.
I'm thinking families can't do that.
No, nobody should do that.
Families and the people who live in New Hampshire trying to pay bills, send their kids to school, trying to take care of their kids, people running small businesses, they don't have time for this.
Well, they don't have time, and our government doesn't have the money, because one of the offshoots of that, and people don't pay attention to this, is it makes the function, as if you could make the function of government any less efficient, it makes it very inefficient, and it actually will drive the total cost of most of the things that you're working on up.
Short-term thinking does that. It's not a good way for us to run a government, and it runs the risk of keeping, a little bit of funding added here, added there to keep going. And it's thoughtless spending.
Well, I thought that was the government in general, thoughtless spending. Isn't that what they...
Not always.
Oh, really?
Not always.
Give me one example.
Well, I'm the vice chair of my town's budget committee.
Uh-oh.
And trust me, there's a lot of thought that goes into that stuff.
Are they ready to kick you out?
They are getting ready to try.
All right. Well, unfortunately, that's going to wrap up the first hour of the Jim Lawrence Show, but make sure we will have the same groksters right here on the Jim Lawrence Show, and I'm sure we'll have a great continuation of our current conversation. Talk to you then. WSMN 1590. This is your host, Jim Lawrence of the Jim Lawrence Show. Welcome back to the second hour of the Jim Lawrence Show this sunshiny Tuesday right here in downtown Nashua. We're going to continue to blast the truth all over downtown Nashua and the rest of the world right here from the turret at WSMN. And I am still joined in the turret by none other than Granite Groksters Skip Murphy, Steve McDonald, and I have on the line Ellen Kolb. Finally.
Hi there.
Oh, hello. Welcome back.
Thank you.
So it just seems like we were on the air like 5 minutes ago.
Yeah.
Maybe 4.5. what's 5 minutes amongst friends? And I do still consider you guys friends. So when we were on the break, we had an interesting conversation because I had a reunion with somebody I haven't seen in a few years. I was at a local establishment in Milford, New Hampshire, Cafe on the Oval. I don't know if any of you've had the pleasure of being there. There was a small group of us enjoying lunch. And all of a sudden, who came walking in? None other than my old nemesis and opponent in the 2016 congressional race, Ann Custer. So she came walking into the cafe on the Oval, and she looked, and I turned around and looked. I smiled and nodded at her, and she sat down at her table very quickly, stayed there for about 5 or 10 minutes, got up, ran outside, took a picture from the outside of the cafe, and off she went. So I guess she didn't want to have another debate with Jim Lawrence once again. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. And I have witnesses.
She plays to her strengths.
Yeah, I have witnesses. I mean, we were all sitting at the table. She got up and got out of there. She said, nope. She still got her picture out in front of it. So, campaign stop, I guess. I would have enjoyed talking to her, because I would have, had some very good questions for her. Like, when are we having this downhill ski racing event that we promised the viewers on WMUR in a live televised debate that we were going to engage in? I mean, when is this stuff going to happen? Or is that just another one of these campaign promises that are never going to be delivered on? I don't know. Boy, is this silence in here? What's going on here?
What do I do with that?
This is the Great Granite Grok. I mean, you guys are supposed to be like full of information.
Skiing?
I mean, you have just given me a visual. I will not be able to get out of my head for hours.
But will there ever even be snow? After all, Shaheen, your famous post, Shaheen said, well, snow will no longer be here, so we'll have no ski industry. Maybe Annie Custer's already taken her at her word.
We're just going to change the name of snow so that it's now called something else so that they can be correct. See, it's not snow anymore. It's global warming.
No, it's climate change fluff.
There you go.
Oh, like in
that's a good word, fluff.
Yeah, like in California, who have just said, well, they're no longer convicted criminals or felons. They are justice-involved people.
Come on now.
Atmosphere.
It's getting a little thick here in the studio.
Atmospheric disturbance flakes.
I didn't wear my boots here. But you know what? Getting back to Ann Custer, I know why she left the cafe very quickly. Because she, I bet you that she's been doing her homework, and she went back to 2016 and looked at the election results, and she saw that she did not get 50% of the vote in 2016. And this strange guy that nobody knew named Jim Lawrence with little to no money got more votes than any Republican in the history of the state in CD2, more than Charlie Bass, more than anyone. So it probably she had PTSD from that or something. I mean, is that possible?
Well, she's probably thinking about it now because that Trump ran in 2016 and he's running in 2020. So is she going to have that problem again? I mean, I know Steve Negron's running in CD2 and who knows, other people may announce, but if somebody shows up with enough money to really get some advertising out there, get a little more name recognition than you were able to do, she could be in trouble.
Yeah, well, I know she probably thought she was in trouble. What's interesting about this, and I'm looking back at this, and I haven't looked at this in years, but I'm laughing because actually the margin difference between myself and Representative Custer was less than the independent gotten votes. So that's a razor hairs election. She doesn't want another one of those matches.
And that's unusual because typically in CD2 when we lose, you can almost count those independent votes or the Libertarian or whoever ran. It wasn't the Republican or the Democrat. If you just piled them on the Republican side, if you could, and I'm not saying you could because a lot of those people wouldn't have voted for the Republican anyway, so it's not really a fair example. But in, let's call it a fantasy world where we get all those votes, The Republican wins.
Yep. Well, in this case, where she was under 50%, it's a clear indicator that something's wrong there. Her support base isn't what it used to be.
I'll tell you what else it says. Someone who beats her can do so if they take it seriously, do not take any votes for granted, and understand that undeclared voters are your secret weapon.
Hear, hear.
Well,
Were you on the Jim Lawrence campaign in 2016?
I'm a resident of CD1, so I didn't divide my loyalties, but I'm telling you, as someone, I'm an undeclared voter, but I have in the past worked on some statewide Republican campaigns.
Yeah, the
You
reason
don't
why I
take
asked
anything for
the reason
granted.
why I asked the question, because that was definitely something that we were looking at very closely. So
Good. And that's
I
why
would
you
say,
did well.
yeah, I
Hey,
know, and
I was in CD1, but I endorsed Jim Lawrence in CD2.
yes, you did. I remember that. That was a pretty smart endorsement, if I,
think
might
it was.
say
I
so
think it was a good
myself.
bet. I think it was.
And that was early on. That was early in the primary, so nobody really knew what was going on then.
We endorsed Steve Negron as Granite Rock as well.
There you go.
We have this thing for Republicans, especially if they come and
You
talk
mean
to
you
us.
mean real Republicans,
Right. If they'll come and talk to us and answer our questions like nobody else in CD2 did.
Correct. They ran away from us mostly.
And
Really?
that's a sign. That's a sign that maybe we got this guy's right here. He's answering all the questions the right way. We've talked to him about it in depth. I mean, not just like an interview, but I mean, we sat in a room with him for a couple of hours.
Right.
And just
Did you
had a conversation.
You put the bright light on and said, "Where were you on December 23rd?"
Exactly. More or less.
Well, look, we're conservatives. All of us are political activists. We've either helped campaigns or we've helped advocacy groups or, like me, elected official in my hometown. We ask the questions that other conservatives want to have answered. And sometimes those are not comfortable questions because we want to get to the nitty-gritty. And they know that once we've asked the question, they've given an answer, we're going to hold them to it.
And we record it.
And at the same time, we're not playing gotcha. We're
No.
not out to we're not out to pin anybody's hide to the wall. We want to know what a candidate has to offer voters. And while Granite Rock is overall a conservative outfit, there is really quite a variety of interests among the Groksters. Everybody brings something different to the table when there's questions. We are happy to sit down with any candidate, but any candidate who sits down with us can expect questions.
Now, we've already done it so far. Steve Negron, having already been through a Grok gauntlet last election season.
A Gronk gauntlet. I like
that's
that.
what we call him.
Yep. he came back. And about 3 weeks ago, 2 hours, Bill O'Brien, also he's running for U.S. Senate, sat down for 2 hours. Corky Messner has penciled in at this point September 18th. So again,
so Corky Messner is still in the game. I haven't
Well,
heard that name
it's-
recently in the U.S. Senate race.
well, he put up billboards in Manchester when Trump came for his rally. So I kind of took that as an incident that, he's still thinking. He hasn't declared officially, but it's certainly exploratory. And the fact that he's willing to sit down with us says something. We're trying to get General Bolduc to sit down with us. That's turning out to be a little drawn out. I hope that he sits down with us. I think he would be an interesting person to ask questions.
We would like to talk to everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, we may or may not agree, but I mean, he may be able to defend his positions in a way that we've never seen before, even if we don't agree.
Correct.
And that's true for all the candidates.
I mean, nobody's announced in CD1 that I know of at this point, but they will be on our list to contact.
Well, everybody knows the person who's eyeballing that is Eddie Edwards. He seems to be the name that most people are bringing up,
But
time and time again.
But nobody's announced.
Yeah, okay. I didn't announce in 2016 either until 2016. So, you never know.
Well, there's a lot of different reasons. Fiscally, to announce or not to announce and when to do it. So there's plenty of reasons to wait. If he doesn't have a bunch of people piling up saying, I want to run, there's really no reason to put yourself in front of that, especially if you talk to people and you've talked to people who've donated to you before and they say, yeah, I'll support you again. Just let me know when you announce or whatever his deal is, So I would say that as long, and I don't know of any, like you said, I don't know of anybody who's talking about running in CD1 except probably Eddie Edwards. And I'm fine with that. I think that would be awesome because we endorsed him. and 20s.
You guys
we
seem
didn't.
to be.
We didn't. Oh, no, we didn't endorse
we
anybody.
Didn't endorse
You're right.
anybody in that
No,
race.
but when he was the nominee, we.
That might have been a Freudian slip. You heard it here first on the Jim Lawrence Show. Could it be that there'll be a Granite Grok endorsement for Eddie Edwards if he decides to run?
Not
We will
necessar-
have to stay tuned and wait and hear from that one.
Not
Past
necessarily.
performance
If you,
is no guarantee of future endorsement.
yes,
true.
thank you. And we have become extremely stingy.
Let me give you a good example. Jennifer Horn.
When
When she was a Tea Party
Wait a
candidate
minute.
running
Wait.
against Charlie Bass, we supported Jennifer Horn. Shortly after that,
Did you
she
endorse
became-
Jennifer Horn?
After that, she became Charlie
Wait a
Bass,
minute.
and then we didn't.
Back up. You endorsed Jennifer Horn.
Yes.
Yeah, we did. When
Yep.
she was a Tea Party candidate.
Boo!
See, to me,
do you
she's a
hear my
fellow-
disgust through the
She's
radio?
a fellow St. Chris mom to me, going back many years. So I knew her there before she became
This
a
was
candidate.
way back.
But people forget
2010.
she challenged the Republican establishment
Okay.
by taking on Charlie Bass. Things have happened since then, but
Oh, yeah.
that lady put herself out there.
Okay.
You wanna hear
so
our
you're
worst
saying
mistake?
that she had an evolution? Yeah, let me hear your
She
worst
evolved,
mistake.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, evolution's a good word for it. But when someone takes on, a Republican figurehead who takes votes for granted, I say go for it.
Okay.
Go for it. It was necessary in that race because, again, a candidate of either party who takes votes for granted and acts like the seat belongs to him or her needs to be challenged and challenged and challenged.
All right.
It's not good for the state. It's not good for the constituents.
All right, Ellen, I forgive you. All right, so let's hear this. Skip, before we went into that little digression there, said that they made a major mistake. What was the worst mistake that Granite Grok has made?
actually, it was myself and my co-founder of Granite Grok, Doug Lambert.
I wasn't there yet.
No, not yet. It was just the two of us running around the state like fools. And I had just become politically activated at that point. And Carol Shea Porter had taken the seat away from Jeb Bradley. Jeb Bradley decided that he was going to run for the New Hampshire Senate. At that time, he did win. We helped. We had him on our radio show a lot. We wrote a lot about him. He was also saying all the right words, just like Jennifer Horn did back in the Tea Party days. And there was a gentleman on the Democrat side who basically tried to implement a bathroom bill. We called him Bathroom Bud. And he wanted to open up one of the bathrooms in the State House so it was unisex. And, that was well before what's happened now in even a mere high school. So we helped him get elected. And given that the Republicans were in the minority, he voted very well. And then the next year, the Republicans became the majority. And now we have Medicaid expansion here in New Hampshire, a more expensive, more intrusive, much larger, and expensive government than what we had before. Thank you, Jeb Bradley. Thank you, Jeb Bradley, for screwing up our energy marketplace with playing around with what used to be it's Eversource now. It used to be
PSNH.
PSNH.
messing around with the generations under the guise of deregulation, putting through the phony process of, well, we can deregulate if we also decouple generation from transmission. I mean, he has put his fingers into so many things. It's like, just run as a Democrat. Worst mistake ever that we ever did was to endorse him and get him back into the New Hampshire Senate.
Wow, that almost sounds like an anti-endorsement. Actually, I did see you guys do that once. We're going to have to go for a quick break, but stay tuned. There'll be more conversations with Granite Grok here on the Jim Lawrence Show when we return. WSMN 5090. This is your host, Jim Lawrence of the Jim Lawrence Show. Welcome back. Before we went on break, we were having a conversation about the best and the worst Granite Grok endorsements of the past. And the conversation dribbled off into the break. And I'm sure that some of it will come and resurface here as we start to talk, right? Here in the turret here for the Jim Lawrence Show. So, Ellen, you've been kind of quiet there a little bit. So, any predictions on what the future may hold for Granite Grok endorsements? I mean, We just started to talk about anti-endorsements.
Well, we revel in sitting down with candidates. Any candidate, probably on the state level, the federal level, even the state Senate level, who wants to sit down with the Grok, we look forward to it. But there's a lot of other elections that Grok is probably not going to get involved with that's even more important. Whenever there's a big election coming up, I've got a Facebook profile photo of me holding a little sign that says down ballot. State representatives, local budget committees, things like that. Those seats make a difference. And if your listeners take nothing else today, think about, is it your turn? Is it your time? Think about it now. The filing period's next June. Next June's kind of late to think about it. But start thinking now. Is this your time? Do you want to work with your family to figure out how you can do this up in Concord? Do you want to make a difference? Do you want to be the one who makes a determination on whether these vetoes stand or fall or should be cast in the first place? Don't sit home wringing your hands. Is it your time to step up? That's what I want people to think about. It's the little races, the state rep races, the races that involve talking to your neighbors on the street. That's where things are happening.
Well, you raise a very interesting point that most people take for granted. Everybody votes for the president. Then they look at maybe governor or senate, and they don't pay that much attention much below Congress. Yet the majority of everything that impacts your day-to-day life are decisions that are made by all those people that are down ballot.
Exactly right.
So here, listen, Ellen. She's telling the truth. So, Skip, what do you have for us here?
But we have an anecdote, not an anecdote, but an
anecdote
to that. I'm full of
It's an anecdote. Go ahead.
Well, we have microgroks that are starting to appear, as we talked about earlier. These are the folks that can do that local referencing of conservatives that are running in a primary, to have them in, ask them the questions. We will certainly help them learn how to ask those questions, and then they can report what's going on at the local level. So while we can only do so much as the core group of groksters, we can have a much bigger effect locally and get the news out to like-minded voters.
And that's important. I mean, Nashua people send me things from Nashua often, and I think it would be a lot easier if I could just hand them off to somebody who's in the town, in the city, who is familiar, who can go down to town hall, who can go to the school board meeting, who can go to the assessor's office or whatever the issue is that's going on and have a conversation with somebody. Or they're just familiar with people who have, and then they can write about it. And if they want me to look over it and say, yeah, this looks great, I'm happy to do it. But I can't write them all. I can't write all these stories. I can't talk to every rep. I can't talk to your school board members.
He tries.
I have a job. I have a life. I have children. I have dogs. I have things to do, and I spent a lot of time blogging, and it really is an important part of my life. This is my hobby. This is how I spend my spare time. But there's only so many hours in a day, and there's just far too much to talk about.
Look, if you're sitting here with a microphone in your face and you're talking on the air about this stuff, you're obsessed. I agree with Skip. There's no ands, ifs, or buts about that. I mean, they're looking for you, Steve.
There. That's actually
coming to take you away.
They're
coming to take you away to the funny farm where life is beautiful all the time.
I feel fine.
You do that well, Skip.
I had the record.
Really? How many times did you listen to it?
Lots.
Yeah.
I've heard it.
Uh-oh.
But we want, I mean, it's a tough thing because I've done this for so long now. It's pretty natural for me to do it. I can do it pretty quickly, pretty effectively. Not everybody can probably learn the skill, but to be able to do it, some people, they torture themselves over their writing. They write 500 words and it takes them hours. Right? I can write 500 words clean in 10 minutes probably. So I have to remember when I'm looking for writers that not everybody can do that, but they might have something to say. They might want to say it, and they might want to share it as themselves or under a pseudonym or somehow just to tell a story. Maybe they're in government and they can't say who they are, but they know things that people need to hear. Well, if it's local, we want to make sure they have an opportunity to do that. And our front page is going to fill up really, really quick unless we provide outlets for that around the state, and that's really what the microgroks are going to do.
I love that, microgrok. That's a good thing. You guys should copyright that.
I think it's the most exciting thing Grok has started lately because it really is an opportunity for down ballot work.
Well, that's one thing. We've got a couple other projects that we're going to roll out. We've done very well. Steve is really the statistical guy, and he keeps putting up these posts saying, where do we rank here in New Hampshire? And we use Alexa, which is owned by Amazon, and they rate websites both domestically and internationally. And we started off, when did you start tracking? We were 18th or something like that?
March, or actually probably early 2018. And we were in the top 10 or 12. And I was looking at the landscape, the Alexa web traffic landscape, and I'm going, the Keene Sentinel has more traffic than us. That's absurd. So I set a goal. I said, and the Keene Sentinel was like 8th or something like that. And I said, well, we're going to do what we can to grow our readership and beat the Keene Sentinel. Well, that was March of 2018. As of last month, we passed the union leader in Alexa rankings. So we are the #1 digital print media site for online traffic in the state of New Hampshire. And now we have our eyes on WMUR's website. Now that's Hearst Broadcasting. They get national traffic. That's going to be hard to beat. But we want to try and do it. We're up for the challenge. We are drawing in an insane amount of traffic. I mean, it's exponential growth in the last year. We really are just filling a void, and nobody else could do it. And we have the ability, and we have the time, and we have the topics, and we have the personnel, and so we're going to do it.
Yeah, I just giggle every time I think that a ragtag bunch of recalcitrant volunteers, such as the Groksters, have achieved all of this, and we're beating the pants off of multi-million-dollar corporations, and we have like zero budget. We're all volunteers.
We're
Nobody
volunteers,
gets paid.
yeah.
Nobody gets paid. All the money that ever comes in, whether it's through an ad or donations, goes directly into either keeping the hosting charges paid up current, or we buy new equipment, or we buy some software. None of it goes into our pockets.
Well, maybe that's the secret. That's the secret stuff. All volunteers. Sounds like the Jim Lawrence campaign. See, that's it. I'm telling you, that's the secret weapon.
It is a passion for us. It really is. It is an obsession. And I am very thankful every single day for people like Steve and Ellen and Norm and Mike. And, we've got about a stable of 20 folks who will write, not always on a daily basis. Steve lately has been writing far more than I.
Doing the heavy lifting.
Yeah. I'm trying to design some more software that will help us down the road. We're going to be adding a call to action page so that people can say, okay, I want to follow this bill. I want to follow this event. I want to follow this issue. A whole different slice, and we'll automatically have information sent to them. We want to activate our readership to a higher degree. Another project that I'm trying to get lifted is called Cameras for Concord, to get volunteers or maybe some interns to bring video cameras into the hearing rooms at the state capitol. Get that video.
Key pieces of legislation.
Yes. Get that back to us, and we'll put up the video, and that way people can watch that. Now, if you take that concept, marry it with micro-groks, what do you have? Steve just wants to beat WMUR on its Alexa rating. Well, if I have 10 times or 20 times the number of possible people out there in the field with cameras, who gets to report on all that video?
It's a dream.
It's not a dream.
It's a dream. No, it's a mission, actually.
Yeah, I was about to say. So do you think you'll have this all stood up before the election cycle next year?
I don't know. The call to action page, the more I think about it, the larger of a project it goes, and I have to write it mostly myself, which is fine. That's my background as a software engineer. Cameras for Concord depends on other people stepping up, and it also depends on how much money we can raise.
Isn't that always the issue? We're always limited by our resources.
But we do things at such a low budget level, though. We really do. I could probably do almost all of that for the cost of one of the cameras that WMUR has in their studio. In fact, we could probably do 2 or 3 more projects on top of that.
We could. It's true citizen journalism, and those are the kind of folks we're looking for. I mean, we expect you'll have a day job. We expect maybe you have a night job. You probably have a family. You may be a single parent. You may have I don't know, precarious pet situations. I don't know what your circumstances. But at some point, you looked at what was going on and you said, I feel like I need to do something and I can't run for office, which was what my situation was. How can I help? And so I said, well, why don't I dump some of this noise in my brain on a piece of digital paper and see what happens? Look what happened. Okay, I work a full-time job. I have kids. I've raised a family. I mean, if what happens to your state or your town is important enough to you, and you see where it's going, and you look at what politicians are doing, ignore the rhetoric, ignore the noise, ignore the division, ignore the threats that people will try to intimidate you, and just share what you're thinking. And you will be surprised where that will take you.
So there you have it. Granite Grok is going to take over the media outlets here in the Granite State. So where is this all going? I mean, because I know you guys started mostly as a blog / webcast / podcast style media outlet. And I don't know if you guys envisioned that you'd be where you are several years ago. Do you guys sit down and you scope that out and say, okay, this is where we're going? Or is this just like grab the bull by the horns and just go for the ride?
When Doug and I first started Granite Grok, we had met at another conservative radio show up in the Laconia area. And we decided blogging was starting to become popular. And I said, well, if the host doesn't want to do this, how about you and I do this? And he said yes. And so off it went. And we figured, we had lots of opinions on lots of stuff. And we figured that between our families, maybe we'd get 4 or 5 people outside of our families to read the blog site every week. And we weren't even sure about our families. And we took off. We got to that, after about a year and a half, we got to that point where we were stuck halfway between being a state-level blog and being a national blog. We just didn't quite make it to the national blog, but we became well-known nationally as the state blog to get to. And we still try to do that. I said, okay, we're not going to make it to the national. Let's just concentrate on New Hampshire, because one of our mantras amongst a number is screw DC, save New Hampshire. In fact, we got a rather large donation from somebody who came up to me at a political event and said, I grew up 3 miles from here, and the New Hampshire that I loved and that I grew up in is disappearing, and nobody's fighting for it except you guys. What's necessary to take you to that next level? And he gave us a very generous donation, helped us finish the rewrite of our website, bought some new equipment with that. And
now we're doing at least 250,000 page views a month, on our way to 500,000.
Yeah.
So we've made some small improvements.
Small, yeah, not big.
But we've also outlasted everybody. When we started, there were lots of blogs, lots of political blogs here in New Hampshire. One by one, they fell apart. They stopped doing it. They lost their emphasis. It used to be us and Blue Hampshire, right versus left.
Now it's us and Ray Buckley's Twitter feed.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. And we, it's sort of like Survivor. Outlast, outwit, and outthink. And we are... I don't want to sound like my head's exploding from growing in size.
In their defense, if you look at what we have to do and the commitment that's involved and the obsession with talking about these topics to people, many of whom are going to throw things at you verbally every time you bring up a subject, it's exhausting. It can be exhausting. I'm never tired. I am never tired of this, ever. And if anybody thinks that I'm about to slow down, short of having a cardiac arrest on my way out of the building and dropping dead, that's not going to happen.
Oh, yeah. He's sitting there the next day. He asks his wife, can you please bring me my laptop into the hospital room in intensive care?
No, wait a minute. Back up. Time out. Back up. So
I had nothing to do.
Wait a minute. So you've just had a heart attack.
Yes, I did.
And your first response was...
That wasn't my first response.
Get me a laptop so I can blog?
No, but I was...
Third.
All right, so around 6 o'clock, I had the heart attack. By 8:30, I'm in intensive care. Everything's fine. I've got my stents put in. I'm sitting there. I can't do anything.
The look on Jim's face.
I damaged my heart muscle. I can't run around. So I've got my phone, and my phone's about to die, and I don't have my charger. So I'm emailing people saying, oh, hey, I had a heart attack. I'm fine, blah, blah, blah. Let people know, right? Because I didn't want I had an interview with Kimberly that night. I had to have my wife call her and tell her why I couldn't do the interview. You know?
He can't do the interview because he had a heart attack.
Right.
Because
exactly.
all this stuff that's going on in this state,
Had
this
to tell my
crazy stuff,
boss.
gave him a heart attack.
But here I am sitting
It's enough
here,
to give anyone a heart
hooked up
attack.
to like 7,000 machines, and I got nothing to do. Well, when I got nothing to do, baby, I blog. Okay? So my wife brought me my laptop the next day. I spent some time with her, and after she had to leave, I got online and started writing.
All right, if anyone wants to challenge the dedication of this man, I challenge them to come up with a better story than that. He's on death's door here. Just suffered a heart attack in the hospital. Where's my laptop? It's time to blog. It's time for Granite Grok to get the word out. So what did you blog about when you were on your hospital bed after?
I did write that I had a heart attack, and I explained it. And then whatever.
Did you say it was caused by the Democrats?
No, it wasn't. It was cholesterol.
Really?
Yeah, it was my diet.
What was your diet?
My diet was you look at me. I'm thin. I have high blood
What
pressure.
the-
I don't have weight issues. I don't have hypertension. I don't have any of those things. But apparently I am biologically predisposed to collect cholesterol in my veins. And that's what happened. I was just eating I always did. And I guess it took 54 years for that to catch up to me. And so I have
The
changed.
blogger's diet is not nuts, seeds, and fruit.
Well, it is good now. There's a lot of vegetables and fruits in the blogger's diet at my house, and a lot of low-fat things. Like I found chips you can eat with no saturated fat. I mean, you got to look. But there's some decent food out there if you want to improve your diet.
Now, did you know you had high cholesterol before that happened? Or
No, it was high, but it wasn't insanely high.
Okay.
So I was given all the other factors. You know, for those of you who are in that situation, I had no symptoms until I actually had the heart attack. So you never know, right? I mean, now I do. So I'm moving on with that knowledge.
Wow. So they were testing you, and you came out.
I did. I had other situations where I was getting blood tests every year, and I didn't have inflammation markers. My cholesterol was, again, high, but it wasn't out of the range for somebody with...
Yeah, I'm looking out outside the studio.
Somebody who wasn't...
I'm looking at my resident pharmacist trying to figure out his wife, who happens to be a nurse practitioner. Yeah. You know, we've had a lot of conversations about this kind of stuff, but I'm hearing all kinds of information here that does not seem to line up with what the medical experts have been telling me. Wink, wink, nod, nod. So I'm going to look back out again.
Again, I wasn't overweight. I didn't have high blood pressure. I didn't have hypertension. I hadn't smoked for 20 years or whatever. I didn't have any of the other factors that would combine cause them to be more concerned about.
And you actually had a test to look for inflammation markers.
I do.
Determine.
I have another condition that requires that. So.
Okay. And was that similar to what they do at the Cleveland Clinic? I don't know if you're familiar with that.
I don't know.
I'm sorry to ask you all this stuff, but I'm interested because
we're going to talk about my body now. I have ulcerative colitis, so I have inflammation markers could say that there's things going on in my bowel that are unfriendly to my future health.
So you know he's dedicated, he's working after he had a heart attack, and he's also not full of crap. So here, keep going.
I tell you, I got another one coming up, the cleanse. Kimberly, if you're listening, you love the cleanse, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
Well, this sounds like a story.
Everybody's laughing. Before you can have a scope go up your back end, you got to do the cleanse.
Oh, speaking of cleanse, we're going to have to go for a quick break, but there'll be more conversation about the cleanse
Nice
when we
job.
return right here on the Jim Lawrence Show. WSMN 1590. This is your host, Jim Lawrence of the Jim Lawrence Show. This is the appropriate song to lead into our last segment. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but
Are we leaving my colon? Because I'd like to get out of there.
no, no, we're not.
That's a better
gonna
lead in than what I had, which was, okay, all the cops are just down the street. Does that mean all the parking enforcement agents are coming up this way?
No, they're not. No. You just look around. The beauty of this studio is you can look around and you can see what's going on if your car's parked on the street. And you know what? You know, you tell me what cars you're driving, and I'll say, oh, yeah, look, there's parking enforcement in front of your car right there.
Mine's a big white honking truck.
All right, sorry, Frank. We gotta talk about important stuff. As much as we want to sit here and listen to Frank Sinatra all day. But, yeah, no, I don't see any parking enforcement on the loose yet.
Okay, I got 15 minutes.
There you go. Oh, you're alerting them once again. You told them the vehicle description, you told him how much time you have left on the meter, you might be in
no.
trouble. You might be
I'm
in
already
trouble.
past. I got 15 minutes to beat them down there.
Oh.
The stupid parking thing. Most places you can get 2 or 3 hours as a max. You guys only do 90 minutes.
That's the trap. They know that this is a 2-hour show. You ain't going anywhere unless you have the phone app on your phone where you can just like pay for more while you're sitting here looking at them. You're in trouble.
Yeah, well, I just about ran out of data at the Trump rally, waiting around almost all day. I did a lot of surfing on the phone, chewed up a lot of data.
Now, did you miss me warming up for Trump this year?
Miss you?
Yeah, I didn't warm up for Trump this year at the Trump rally.
I didn't know. I did not see you there. And we were there, both of us. We were up on the media riser.
We were there all day.
Where Trump was shaming us for being the media.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I remember that the last time that he was at the Shnu Arena was the night before Election Day. Well, actually, it's been quite some time. Night before Election Day 2016. And that's what I was referring, because I got to speak just before John Sununu. And when Trump came out there, that's the first thing he did. He talked about the media. He says, "You guys are horrible people."
Yeah, so now I have to go buy a new vinyl banner that says Granite Rock. We're not like the others. We're conservative.
Well, you should ask him for a special dispensation. Like kind of like if you were Catholic, you ask the Pope and say, when you come to New Hampshire, say, "You guys are horrible people except for Granite Grok," and he'll probably say Howie Carr too, because he's there
awesome.
too. Howie Carr's
would be.
usually back there.
We get 250,000. That would be peanuts. 250,000 views. That's nothing.
It's a good thing we have a great hosting company, because they can handle that.
They can, yes. So.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, if you want to go to 1 or 2 or 5 million a month, we're fine.
Yeah.
For views, we're good.
Really?
Oh,
yeah.
So you've never got clogged up?
Nope.
We have been Insta-launched probably a dozen times over the years. Instapundit.com, run by law professor Glenn Reynolds, and he's one of the big dogs. He's like in the top 10 for conservative or libertarian blog sites, and he's a news aggregator. Now he's gone from being a single or a solo practitioner to having a group blog. But what they do is they'll go out, and if they see something nice, they'll write a sentence or a phrase and then do a link to that place. And most often than not, they're going all over the place, even to real small blogs. And it's not unknown for them to kill off a server, because if Glenn Reynolds says, "Yeah, go here," everybody goes there and swamps their server and they die. Thankfully, my hosting company has backup capabilities, and we don't have that problem.
Here. I mean, that's the kind of problems you want to have, though.
It is.
Absolutely.
It is.
Absolutely. And we can tell when it happens.
Oh, yeah. You can see the hits.
Oh,
There
yeah.
you
I
go.
think I got 55.
We got a link this month.
Yeah.
We had a really good weekend.
Okay.
I mean, we didn't go into the millions or anything, but I mean, it's one post out of dozens they post every day. And it was sort of a see also link. It wasn't the main headline link.
Yep.
But even with that, I mean, it was like, bam! I'm like, where did that come from? So I'm searching Google Analytics trying to figure out where all this traffic's coming from and who linked to us. And I finally figured out it was Instapundit. And then they use numbers instead of names in their web addresses. And so I got to go there and figure out what I couldn't. I finally found it. I'm like, all right, yeah.
You got it.
I found the post.
That is a badge of honor among bloggers.
I knew
You
what
got
they linked to
Insta
because
Watch.
that post was flying in views, but I couldn't figure out where he linked to it. So it was an adventure.
Sounds like it was. So, just out of curiosity, I mean, what happens when your website actually just becomes overwhelmed? Because you're basically talking about taking over the world. You're never gonna. Doesn't matter. 1 billion views, and you're gonna be all set.
Well, here's the deal. Up until now, this has been a labor of love. For the most part, all the charges I have pulled out of my own pocket. Well, 2 years ago, my job got offshored to half to Mexico, half to India. So I've had to rethink things. So we're slowly trying to monetize the site. You will see sponsored ads on there from time to time. We are taking ads. We have a couple of long-term sponsors that have signed up. We're also looking for more. So politicians, we will take your ads, by the way. Conservative business owners, we will take your ads. And, we'll
take your money for your ads. Thank you.
Whichever. I mean, we also
We got bills
relaunched Grok Talk, our internet radio show.
Okay, I was going to ask you about that because that's how I basically got connected with you guys initially, was on Grok Talk. So that's going to be coming back now.
We did the first broadcast earlier last week, but we're doing it differently. Instead of being in a physical room with all kinds of equipment, fancy, expensive equipment for us, we're just
you mean like this?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Exactly.
Okay.
We're just doing it using teleconferencing software. So I don't have to make the trip down to Concord and back every single week. He doesn't have to make the trip all the way up to Concord and back every single week.
We're doing it in the cloud.
Yes. So you can see.
He says that well. Come again with
We're
that.
doing it in the cloud.
He's doing it in the cloud. It's just cool, new chic way
Like
of
I know
getting
what
information
the cloud is
out.
or something. I do actually.
Well, you do know what the
I
cloud is.
because we're in the cloud. We are.
Yeah.
And we're using conferencing software, and we beta tested it last week. That's the first time we'd ever tried it. We just kind of let's wing it. We don't even really. It's the same format pretty much. We're only doing an hour instead of 2. And for the video version, it's whatever comes off the video version, and for the audio version, I add the bumpers and any ads we want to throw in. So if you want to do audio ads on our show, we'll add them in for you, and that'll be it. We'll pump it out the same way we always used to through all the regular channels, and you'll be able to listen on GraniteRock.com and a bunch of other places.
I figured out how we could do ads in real time too.
Yeah.
We could also just pre-record them so they sound good.
Well, this is true, but I mean regular video ads and injecting that into the stream.
Okay, you're the video guy. I'm the audio guy. We'll make it work.
Yeah.
All right.
I stand by, and I'm very grateful to be involved in a project with people who understand the tech part, because all I know how to do is put up a post. But that's one of the strengths of Granite Grok is Steve and Skip and Mike have built themselves a broad team. Everybody brings something in, and it works.
And that is true. That really is true. Everybody's a little bit different. Everybody has a little bit different focus. Ellen brings an awful lot from the right to life, a lot of the legislative activism that I don't have. My skills and my interests are in other areas. Same thing with Steve. Susan Olson writes for us. Mike has other stuff. He does a lot more economics.
Ed
Nail does voter fraud and community malfeasance.
Yeah, let's talk about voter fraud a little bit here, because you know what? That's something that is actually relevant to the news that's up right now, because one of the bills that Governor Vito Sununu, that I'm going to call him that from here on out. One of the bills he vetoed was a bill introduced by Senator Melanie Levesque that wanted to basically redefine some of the definitions of what a citizen is in the state of New Hampshire.
Resident versus domicile and so on.
Exactly. And this seems to be a common theme. And as you know, in 2016 and again in 2018, there were quite a number of votes that came, particularly in areas where there are colleges, that were called into question because of this residency rule. And obviously the House and Senate passed legislation. I think Senator Regina Birdsell was the one who introduced the bill and ended up passing and was signed into law to try and close some of these gaps that we were finding that was allowing people to vote in two different voting districts, which really is against the law anyway, but they were being able to do that here in New Hampshire. And in close elections, like all of the elections in 2016 and others in 2018, these votes were potentially enabling changing the outcome of the election.
Absolutely.
They were that close.
Both Kelly lost because of out-of-state votes, and Donald Trump lost New Hampshire because of out-of-state
There were
votes.
at least 3 state Senate seats
Easily.
that were decided by a handful of votes in 18.
And it's this duplicitous Democrat Party idea that you should vote where you are. But I just recently wrote about this. The the Bedford Town Committee, Democrat Town Committee, sent a letter out to every single graduating student congratulating them, saying, hey, make sure you register to vote. And, oh, by the way, if you're not in New Hampshire, make sure you get an absentee ballot so you can vote here. And I'm like,
whoa.
Why can't the entire population of Dartmouth and UNH and every other college in this state who's not from here do the exact same thing and vote where they live.
You know, it's funny because where I went to school, the United States Air Force Academy, we did the same thing. And I voted on an absentee ballot all 4 years I was there. I didn't vote in Colorado.
Yeah.
I mean, I was
Same thing.
there, but that's not where my state residency was.
Yeah. All my time going to Boston University, I always voted absentee. I always made sure that I had that ballot. I never thought of voting in Boston. And yet, this seems to be...
Well, I think it's illegal.
Well...
They may actually enforce that law.
So here's
talking Massachusetts and Boston. Come on.
Here's a fun fact for you. We all know how close the race between Ancaster and I was in 2016. Guess what the top 4 towns with the largest margins between us favoring Ancaster were?
Hanover and Keene.
Hanover.
Yep. Hanover,
Durham.
Keene, and Plymouth. Those were the 3, and then, of course, Concord. That was the 4th. But if you look at that, 3 out of those 4 communities were all college towns.
Yep.
Well, what you're seeing is, we laughed earlier you laughed earlier when I said out in California, the justice-involved people as a euphemism for, convicted criminals. All of this is the same thing. The left loves to redefine the language, and this pertains to voter fraud and almost anything else. They are changing our common language out from underneath us to serve their political agenda, and voter fraud is just one instance of that. So that's why you're seeing this fight, because when the Republicans try to lock it down to commonly understood and defined terms, they lose. They have to resort to the redefinition in order to make some kind of inroads against a conservative agenda or to push their agenda along. And it just never, ever stops.
Wow. I'm going to shift gears to something a little bit more pleasant.
This is fun to talk about.
It's fun to talk about, but we're going to shift to a good news story. The Laconia VFW Post 1670 will be hosting their Salute to Veterans this September 28th. Tickets are still available at VFW Post 1670. Rumor has it that there'll be some strange radio host named Jim Lawrence actually emceeing that event. So should be a fun time for all. But, voter fraud is interesting. But that's a little bit more positive. Saluting the veterans is a better topic than talking about how elections are being stolen from Granite Staters
They're
here.
being stolen from veterans, too.
Yeah.
Yes, they are. They are.
I will say that my family, as I have thought over the years, I have come to know that my family has been a military family. Both of my sons served in either the U.S. Marines or with the 101st Airborne. And I think I talked about earlier, one of my biggest laments politically was to help Jeb Bradley get back into the New Hampshire House. I think the Senate. One of the biggest drawbacks to my life in general was never doing a stint in the military. And for that, I am sorry.
Well, here, you're still doing a good service to the Granite State, and I, for one, being a veteran, appreciate that. So, unfortunately, we've run out of time today, but thank you, Skip Murphy, for joining us today. Thank you, Steve McDonald. And then, of course, thank you, Ellen Kolb.
It's been a pleasure.
Stay tuned. There'll be more to follow here in WSMN, but you know what? Make sure you tune in next Tuesday, 4 to 6 p.m. right here, WSMN 1590, to the Jim Lawrence Show. May not be as exciting as Granite Grok Invasion, but I'm sure it'll be something good. Talk to you then.